My family disowned me at 16 after my entitled stepmom falsely accused me of essaying her. Now 10. Why? I am Adela, 26 years old now, but my story begins a decade ago when I was 16 and my family disowned me. My stepmother Amanda falsely accused me of sexually assaulting her, a lie that destroyed my life overnight. After years of rebuilding from nothing, my stepsister Brittany just contacted me to say Amanda died and confessed everything on her deathbed. Now they want me back in the family like nothing happened. I told them I was glad Amanda died and wished my father would join her. Let me know where you are watching from and subscribe to hear how they went from disowning me to harassing me. Life before everything fell apart was actually pretty wonderful. I grew up as the only child of my dad, James, and my mum, Elizabeth. We lived in a nice suburban neighborhood in Connecticut where my dad worked as a corporate attorney and my mum was an elementary school teacher. My childhood memories are filled with weekend trips to museums, holiday traditions, and bedtime stories. My mum and I were incredibly close. She taught me to play piano, helped me with my science fair projects, and encouraged my love of reading. We would spend hours talking about books we had both read, discussing characters like they were our friends. When I was 12, my mum was diagnosed with aggressive breast cancer. Despite the best medical care my dad could afford, she passed away 8 months after her diagnosis. The loss was devastating for both of us. My dad and I clung to each other through the grief, and for about a year it was just the two of us trying to navigate our new reality without her. I still remember how he would sit beside my bed when I cried myself to sleep, and how we would look through family photo albums together on the really hard days. Dad tried his best to be both parents. He learned to French braid my hair, albeit clumsily because he knew Mum used to do it. He attended every parent-teacher conference and school concert. He even hosted a sleepover for my 13th birthday, awkwardly trying to connect with my friends. We were managing creating a new normal together. I thought our bond was unbreakable. When I was 13, about a year and a half after Mum died, Dad met Amanda at a charity fundraiser for the hospital where Mum had been treated. The irony still makes me bitter. Amanda was a pharmaceutical sales representative, beautiful and charming. She had a daughter my age named Brittany from her previous marriage. At first, Amanda seemed perfect. She was warm and attentive toward me, bringing me little gifts and asking about my interests. She never tried to replace my mom, which I appreciated. She would say things like, "Your mother sounds like she was an amazing woman. I wish I could have met her." Brittany and I got along well initially too. We both loved the same music, and she introduced me to makeup and fashion in a way my mum never had the chance to. Having never had siblings, I was excited about the possibility of having a sister. We would stay up late talking about schoolboys we thought were cute and our dreams for the future. I remember telling her I wanted to become a doctor, and she said she wanted to be a fashion designer. We even planned to get an apartment together in New York City after college. 6 months after they started dating, Dad proposed to Amanda and they got married in a small ceremony. I was a junior bridesmaid and Brittany was the maid of honor. The wedding was beautiful, and I genuinely felt hopeful about our blended family. Amanda moved into our home with Brittany, and we redecorated to make it feel like a fresh start for all of us. Dad seemed happy again, laughing more, the weight of grief lifting from his shoulders. I was happy for him. The first 6 months of our new family arrangement were peaceful and promising. We ate dinner together every night, sharing stories about our days. We took a family vacation to Florida, where we visited Disney World and spent days at the beach. Amanda would help me with my homework when Dad was working late, and I felt like I had found a new support system. Our house became lively again, filled with the sounds of laughter and conversation that had been missing since Mum died. During this time, I was excelling at school. I was taking advanced placement classes, playing volleyball on the school team, and volunteering at the local animal shelter. I had dreams of attending an Ivy League college and eventually medical school. My teachers praised my work ethic and intelligence. Dad always said I had inherited my mum's brains and his determination, a combination he claimed would make me unstoppable. Our neighborhood was one of those picture-perfect American suburbs with manicured lawns and friendly neighbors who brought casseroles when someone was sick. We lived in a 2-story colonial with a big backyard where we hosted summer barbecues. My room was on the 2nd floor, painted light blue with bookshelves lining one wall. It was my sanctuary, filled with photos of Mum and me, awards from school competitions, and the collection of classic novels Mum had started for me. I had several hobbies that kept me busy and happy. I played piano just like Mum had taught me, and I was getting quite good. I loved photography and would spend hours taking pictures in the nearby state park. I was also part of the debate team at school, which Dad said would serve me well if I decided to follow in his legal footsteps instead of pursuing medicine. Life seemed full of possibilities. If someone had told me then how drastically everything would change, I would never have believed them. But looking back, I can see the warning signs that I was too young and naive to recognize at the time. The shift in our family dynamic was so subtle at first that I barely noticed it. About 7 months after the wedding, Amanda began to change. The warm smile she had for me started to appear forced. The thoughtful questions about my day became perfunctory. I initially chalked it up to the honeymoon phase ending, but it was more than that. Amanda began favoring Brittany in small ways. If there was one slice of cake left, it was saved for Brittany. When it was time to pick movies for family night, Brittany's choices always won. Dad didn't seem to notice these small inequities, or if he did, he didn't think they mattered. But they were the first drops in what would become a flood of favoritism. Around this time, Dad started working longer hours. A big guest at his firm demanded more of his attention, and he would often come home after I was already in bed. This left Amanda in charge of the household, and she used this authority to slowly rewrite the rules. My chores doubled while Brittany's decreased. My curfew became earlier than hers, despite us being the same age. When I tried to point out the unfairness to Dad, he would tiredly say, "Amanda is trying her best to manage the house. Let's not make things harder for her." The criticism of my appearance began next. Amanda would make comments like, "Those jeans are a bit tight, don't you think? We wouldn't want people getting the wrong idea about you." Or, "Your hair looks so greasy. Didn't your mother teach you proper hygiene?" These comments always had a sting at the end, often a jab at my deceased mother, or an implication that I was somehow promiscuous or unclean. One evening, when Dad was working late, Amanda and I were alone in the kitchen. She was preparing dinner and I was doing homework at the table. Out of nowhere, she said, "Your father tells me your mother was quite the perfectionist. It must have been exhausting living up to her standards." When I defended Mom, saying she was supportive and kind, Amanda laughed and said, "We all rewrite history to cope with loss. I'm sure she had her flaws like everyone else." As Amanda changed, so did Brittany. The girl who had once been excited to be my sister became cold and distant. She stopped inviting me to hang out with her and her friends. At school, she would walk past me without acknowledgement, and at home she would roll her eyes when I spoke. When I asked her what was wrong, she said, Mum told me what you're really like, that you're jealous of me and that you resent us for replacing your mom." I began noticing items missing from my room. A silver bracelet Mom had given me, a signed copy of my favourite book, photos of Mum and me. When I confronted Amanda and Brittany, they denied taking anything and suggested I was becoming paranoid and difficult. Dad suggested I was probably misplacing things due to stress from school. One night, I overheard Amanda talking to Dad in their bedroom. Their door was ajar and I heard my name. Amanda was saying, "I'm concerned about Adela. She's becoming withdrawn and hostile. I think she might be having trouble accepting our family. Maybe she needs to see someone professional." Dad sounded worried as he replied, "Do you really think it's that bad?" Amanda responded, "I don't want to alarm you, but Brittany told me Adela said some disturbing things about me, about how she wishes I would disappear." I was shocked. I had never said anything like that to Brittany. But when I tried to defend myself the next day, Dad said, "Amanda is just trying to help. She's worried about you, and frankly, so am I. Your behaviour has been concerning lately." I felt like I was going crazy. The people I lived with were creating a narrative about me that wasn't true, yet I couldn't seem to convince anyone of the reality. Amanda became skilled at rewriting our family stories to exclude me. When relatives visited, she would talk about our family vacation, to places they had gone before I was part of the picture, or worse, places we had all visited together, but from which I was now being erased. She would show photos where I happened to be absent, or standing at the edge easily cropped out. Any attempt I made to address the issues was met with gaslighting. "You're being too sensitive. That never happened. You're remembering it wrong. Why are you always trying to create drama?" Eventually, I began to doubt my own perceptions and memories. Maybe I was the problem. Maybe I was unable to adapt to the new family dynamic. Despite the growing tension, I desperately tried to maintain my relationship with Dad. I would wait up for him on nights he worked late just to have a few minutes of conversation. I wrote him notes and left them in his briefcase. I tried to interest him in my school projects and achievements the way he had been before the remarriage. But Dad was becoming increasingly distant. He seemed tired of mediating between Amanda and me, and it was easier for him to accept her version of events than to investigate deeper. Dad and Amanda started planning family events that somehow always fell on days when I had previous commitments. "Oh, we thought you were busy with volleyball that weekend," Amanda would say with fake disappointment when I expressed hurt about being excluded from a trip to visit Dad's parents. The message was clear: the family unit was Amanda, Brittany, and Dad. I was becoming an outsider in my own home. By the time I turned 15, I felt completely isolated. My room became my refuge, though even there, I didn't feel safe suspecting Amanda entered it when I was at school. The home that had once been filled with love and security had become a place of anxiety and fear. I began counting the days until college, when I could escape the toxic environment that was slowly crushing my spirit. The summer before my junior year of high school, Amanda's hostility toward me escalated dramatically. What had been subtle undermining became an aggressive campaign to drive a wedge between my father and me. It was as if she had been testing the waters before, and now confident in her control over my dad, she no longer felt the need to disguise her animosity. One evening in July, I came downstairs to find Dad at the kitchen table looking upset. When he saw me, his expression hardened. "Amanda tells me you called Brittany a spoiled brat and told her she wasn't welcome in this house," he said sternly. I was completely blindsided. No such conversation had ever taken place. But before I could properly defend myself, Amanda walked in, put her arm around Dad and said, "Honey, I asked you not to confront her. You know how she twists things." The setup was perfect. I realized she had already convinced him that anything I said in my defense would be a lie. After that incident, the accusations became more frequent and more serious. Amanda told Dad I was stealing money from his wallet, that I was sneaking out at night to meet boys, that I had been caught drinking at a party. None of it was true, but with both Amanda and Brittany backing up each other's stories, Dad believed them. His trust in me eroded with each new lie. Brittany, who had once been friendly, now seemed to take pleasure in tormenting me. She would make spiteful comments just out of earshot of adults knock things off my desk and claim it was an accident, or accidentally spill drinks on my schoolwork. At school, she started telling people I was mentally unstable and that I resented her because she was prettier and more popular. The stress began to affect my academic performance. My straight A average slipped to B's and then C's. I had trouble concentrating in class and staying awake, as I was having nightmares and difficulty sleeping. My volleyball coach asked if everything was okay at home after I missed several easy plays during a game. I couldn't bring myself to tell the truth, so I blamed it on not feeling well. One day, I returned from school to find my room in disarray. My drawers were open clothes strewn about, and my journal was missing. I found Amanda in the master bedroom and confronted her. "Did you go through my room?" I asked, trying to keep my voice level despite my anger. She looked at me with cold eyes and said, "As long as you're living in this house, nothing is really yours. James and I have the right to know what you're up to." I felt violated and helpless. When I told Dad about Amanda going through my things, he sighed heavily. "Adela, Amanda is concerned about your behavior lately. She was looking for evidence of drugs or alcohol. If you have nothing to hide, then you have nothing to worry about." I couldn't believe my own father was defending such an invasion of privacy. It was like he couldn't see the person Amanda truly was. Or worse, he didn't want to see it. The next morning, I found my backpack soaked with water, ruining a history paper I had spent weeks researching. When I accused Brittany, who had been alone in the house when it happened, she feigned innocence. "Maybe you left it out in the rain. You seem pretty forgetful these days," she said with a smirk. Amanda backed her up, suggesting I was becoming paranoid and looking for someone to blame for my own carelessness. A dinner party with Dad's colleagues became an opportunity for Amanda to humiliate me. As we sat around the table, she brought up my falling grades and suggested to everyone that I might be experimenting with substances or going through a rebellious phase. The looks of pity and judgment from the guests made me want to disappear. Dad said nothing to defend me, just looked uncomfortable and changed the subject. Amanda began losing important items of mine right before I needed them. My graphing calculator disappeared the day before a math exam. Permission slips for school events would vanish from where I had left them on the counter. My volleyball uniform went missing before a big game. Each time Amanda would suggest I was becoming irresponsible and disorganized, further cementing the negative image she was creating of me. The rumors Brittany spread at school began to affect my social life. Friends I had known for years started avoiding me. I overheard whispers in the hallway about me being crazy or attention-seeking. One day, a girl I had considered a close friend told me she couldn't hang out anymore because her parents thought I was a bad influence. I felt completely isolated with no support at home or at school. Mrs. Jackson, my English teacher, was the only person who seemed to notice something was wrong. After class one day, she asked me to stay behind. Adela, I've noticed a change in you this semester. Your writing is still excellent, but there's a sadness in it that wasn't there before. Is everything okay at home? I came so close to telling her everything, but fear held me back. What if she didn't believe me either? What if telling made things worse? So I just said I was fine, just tired from studying for the SATs. That night I cried myself to sleep, feeling trapped in a situation that was growing more unbearable by the day. I had no allies, no one who would take my side against Amanda and Brittany. My father, the one person who should have protected me above all others, had become a stranger who looked at me with suspicion rather than love. I felt completely alone with no way out. I didn't know then that the worst was yet to come, that Amanda was building towards something that would shatter what remained of my life. Looking back, I can see all the pieces being put into place for the ultimate betrayal, but at 16, I was simply trying to survive each day, hoping that somehow things would get better. They didn't. They got infinitely worse. The day that changed everything started like any other school day that fall. I woke up, got dressed, and headed downstairs for breakfast, carefully avoiding interaction with Amanda and Brittany, who were already at the table. Dad had left early for court, so there was no buffer between us. I grabbed a granola bar and left for school without a word. By lunchtime, I had developed a pounding headache and felt nauseous. The school nurse took my temperature, confirmed I had a fever of 101 degrees, and called home. To my dismay, Amanda answered and said she would pick me up. The 10-minute car ride was silent except for her occasional sighs of inconvenience. When we arrived home, she told me to go to my room and stay there so I wouldn't infect Brittany. That was fine by me. I took some medicine, crawled into bed, and fell into a fitful sleep. I woke up a few hours later feeling even worse and went to the bathroom to splash cold water on my face. As I returned to my room, I heard noises coming from inside. I pushed the door open to find Amanda sitting at my desk, reading through my private journal. Scattered around her were photos she'd pulled from my drawers and letters from my mum that I kept in a special box. Anger surged through me despite my illness. "What are you doing?" I demanded. "Those are private." Amanda turned to me with a look of disdain. "I was looking for your math textbook to check something for Brittany. She said an obvious lie since my textbooks were on the shelf, not in my desk drawer. But I found this instead. Very interesting reading. She held up my journal. "Your father would be devastated to know what you really think of his wife." "Give that back," I said, stepping forward to take my journal. "You have no right to read my private thoughts." Amanda stood up, holding the journal away from me. "No right, I'm the adult here. I'm responsible for this household when your father isn't home. And frankly, I'm concerned about what I've discovered." Her voice took on a theatrical quality that I would later recognize as her practicing for my father's arrival. The anger in these pages, the resentment. And the things you write about Brittany and me, they're disturbing, Adela. Really disturbing. I lunged for the journal, managing to grab it from her hand. "You invaded my privacy. You went through my things. Dad will never believe your lies about me once I tell him what you've been doing." Amanda's face changed, then her eyes narrowing and her mouth twisting into a cruel smile. "You're so naive, Adela. Who do you think he's going to believe, the perfect wife who saved him from his grief, or the troubled teenager who's been acting out for months? I can make him believe anything I want." Something in me snapped. All the months of gaslighting, isolation, and cruelty came pouring out. "I hate you," I said, my voice shaking. "You never loved my dad. You just wanted his money and his house. You've been trying to get rid of me from day one, and I won't let you win. I'm going to tell him everything." "Go ahead," she laughed. "It will be your word against mine, and I always win." Then her voice dropped to a menacing whisper. "But if you want to play this game, understand that I will destroy you. By the time I'm done, your father won't even want to look at you." I felt a chill at her words, but also a surge of determination. I pulled out my phone and held it up. "Say it again," I challenged her. "I want to record your threats so Dad can hear them for himself." Her eyes widened in surprise, and for a moment she seemed uncertain. Then her expression changed to one of fear. She backed away from me toward the door. "What are you doing?" she asked, her voice trembling. "Stay away from me." Confused by her sudden change in demeanor, I stepped forward. "What are you talking about? I'm not doing anything." "Don't touch me!" She screamed loud enough for the neighbors to hear. She stumbled backward into the hallway, still keeping her eyes on me with an expression of exaggerated terror. Then I understood. She was setting the stage, creating a scene. "Amanda, stop it. Nobody's going to believe this act," I said. But my voice wavered with uncertainty, because I knew someone would believe it, my father. As if on cue, I heard the front door open and my father's voice call out, "I'm home early. Anybody here?" Amanda gave me one last look, a mixture of triumph and malice, before her face transformed into a mask of distress. She ran toward the stairs, crying out, "James, help me, please help me." I followed her, still recording on my phone, determined to capture her performance and show my father the truth. But I wasn't prepared for what happened next. As my father appeared at the bottom of the stairs, Amanda threw herself into his arms, sobbing hysterically. "She tried to attack me, James," she wailed. "I went to check on her because she was sick and she got angry that I was in her room. She pushed me against the wall and put her hands on me." My father looked up at me standing at the top of the stairs, phone still in my hand. His face transformed with a rage I had never seen before. "What did you do?" he demanded. "Nothing, she's lying. She was going through my things, reading my journal. I have it all recorded," I said, holding up my phone. "Listen to it, Dad, please." But Amanda continued her performance. I was so scared, James. The way she looked at me, the things she said she hates me, that she wants me gone. She said she'd make it happen. She buried her face in his chest, her shoulders shaking with theatrical sobs. My father gently moved Amanda aside and started up the stairs toward me, his face contorted with anger. "Give me the phone, Adela," he demanded, his voice frightfully calm. "Dad, please listen," I begged, backing up as he approached. "She's lying. She's been trying to turn you against me for months. Just listen to the recording." But he wasn't listening. He reached me and grabbed my wrist, painfully twisting until I dropped the phone into his hand. To my horror, he threw it against the wall with such force that it shattered pieces, scattering across the hardwood floor. With it went my only evidence, my only defense. "Dad, no," I cried out, dropping to my knees to gather the pieces as if I could somehow put them back together. "How dare you?" he said, his voice shaking with rage. "How dare you touch my wife? After everything we've done for you, this is how you repay us." "I didn't touch her," I shouted, tears streaming down my face. "She's lying. She's always lying about me." Just then, the front door opened again and Brittany walked in. She took in the scene, her mother crying in the entryway, my father standing over me as I knelt among the pieces of my broken phone. "What's going on?" she asked, but the look she exchanged with her mother told me she already knew. This had been planned. "Your sister assaulted your mother." My father said the word sister, now sounding like an insult. "I saw it," Brittany said immediately, without hesitation. "I came home early and was in my room. I heard Mum scream and saw Adela pushing her against the wall. Mum was just trying to check her temperature because she was sick." I stared at her in disbelief. Brittany hadn't been home. She had just walked in. But her lie was so smooth, so confident, that I knew they'd practiced this scenario. They had been waiting for the right moment, and my illness had provided the perfect opportunity. "She wasn't even here," I protested, looking desperately at my father. "Dad, please, you've known me my whole life. You've known her for 2 years. How can you believe this?" But the look in his eyes told me he was already lost to me. The trust was gone, replaced by a cold fury that made him a stranger. "Pack your things," he said. "You have 1 hour, then I want you out of this house." "What?" I gasped, unable to comprehend what he was saying. "Dad, no. Where am I supposed to go? I'm 16. "You should have thought of that before you put your hands on Amanda," he said coldly. 1 hour, Adela, and consider yourself lucky I'm not calling the police." "Amanda's still playing," the victim gasped. "James, you can't put her on the street. What about sending her to boarding school or to your sister's place?" It was a calculated move, making her appear compassionate, while ensuring I would still be removed from the home. My father shook his head. "My sister lives across the country, and boarding schools don't accept students in the middle of the semester, especially not ones with behaviour problems." "Then what about that friend of hers, the one with the teacher mother?" Amanda suggested, referring to Mrs. Jackson. "Surely they would take her in temporarily while we figure out a more permanent solution." The way she said permanent solution sent chills down my spine. This had been her goal all along, to permanently remove me from the family. My father nodded slowly. "I'll call them. But regardless, Adela, you need to pack your essential belongings. You won't be sleeping here tonight." In a daze, I rose to my feet and went to my room. This couldn't be happening. My own father was throwing me out based on a lie. As I mechanically pulled clothes from drawers and placed them in a suitcase, I tried to think of who I could turn to, who would believe me over Amanda and Brittany. My father appeared in the doorway, his face still hard. Mrs. Jackson has agreed to let you stay with them tonight. After that, we'll have to see. I'm driving you there in 30 minutes. Dad, I said, my voice breaking, please don't do this. Please just listen to me. For a moment, something flickered in his eyes, a shadow of the father I had known, but then it was gone, replaced by the cold stranger who had taken his place. 30 minutes, Adela, he repeated, then turned and left. I finished packing in a fog of disbelief and heartbreak. When it was time to leave, I carried my suitcase downstairs to find my father waiting by the door. Amanda and Brittany were nowhere to be seen, probably celebrating their victory in private. The drive to Mrs. Jackson's house was silent. When we arrived, my father spoke only to confirm the arrangement with Mrs. Jackson, not once looking me in the eye. As he turned to leave, I made one last desperate attempt. Dad? I called after him. I love you. He paused for the briefest moment, but didn't turn around. Then he walked to his car without a word, got in, and drove away, leaving me standing on the doorstep of my English teacher's house, watching the last pieces of my family life disappear down the street. The first night at Mrs. Jackson's house, I hardly slept. I lay on the pull-out couch in her living room, staring at the ceiling, replaying the events of the day in my mind. How had my life imploded so completely in just a few hours? By morning, my eyes were swollen from crying, and I felt hollow, as if something essential had been scooped out of me. Mrs. Jackson was kind, but clearly uncomfortable with the situation. Your father called again this morning, she told me over breakfast. He said he needs to make more permanent arrangements for you and asked if you could stay here for a few more days. I nodded numbly, unable to form words. The reality that my father had actually disowned me was still too enormous to comprehend. Mrs. Jackson, sensing my distress, placed a gentle hand on my shoulder. Adela, I don't know what's going on between you and your family, but I'm required by law to contact Child Protective Services when a minor is kicked out of their home. I made the call this morning. A social worker named Ms. Rivera came to the house that afternoon. She interviewed me for hours, asking about the events leading up to my father's decision, about my relationship with Amanda and Brittany, about any history of violence or aggression on my part. I told her everything, my voice flat and emotionless. It felt like I was describing someone else's life, not my own. I've spoken with your father and stepmother, Ms. Rivera said when I finished. They tell a very different story. They claim you've had anger issues since your mother's death, that you've been hostile toward your stepmother and stepsister from the beginning, and that this physical altercation was the final straw. That's not true, I said, but I could hear the defeat in my voice. They planned this. Amanda wanted me gone from the start. Ms. Rivera nodded non-committally. In these situations, the truth is often somewhere in the middle. What matters now is finding you a safe place to stay while we sort this out. Your father has signed temporary guardianship over to the state, which means we'll need to place you with a foster family. The words foster family sent a wave of panic through me. Everything was happening too fast. Just days ago, I had been a normal high school student with a home and a family. Now I was being treated like an unwanted burden, passed from one stranger to another. 2 days later, I was placed with the Fosters, a middle-aged couple who had been taking in teenagers for years. The irony of their surname wasn't lost on me, but I was too numb to find it amusing. Their house was in a working-class neighbourhood across town, far from the comfortable suburb I had grown up in. My new room was small and plain, with a twin bed, a desk and a dresser. The Fosters seemed nice enough, but I kept my distance, afraid to form any attachments that could be ripped away again. The morning after I moved in with the Fosters, I received a text message from Brittany. You got what you deserved, psycho. Do everyone a favour and kill yourself. I stared at the phone screen, shocked by the cruelty. This was the girl who had once been excited to be my sister, who had stayed up late with me talking about our dreams. Now she was telling me to end my life. I blocked her number without responding. I tried calling my father several times over the next few days, but he never answered. Finally, I received a terse email. I think it's best if we don't have contact for a while. Amanda has filed a restraining order as a precaution. Please respect that and do not attempt to come to the house or contact any of us. A restraining order based on a lie. It was the final betrayal, the last nail in the coffin of our relationship. Mrs. Foster, who insisted I call her Jean, found me crying in my room after I received the email. Unlike Mrs. Jackson, she didn't shy away from my pain. She sat beside me on the bed and let me sob against her shoulder. I know it hurts, honey. she said softly, "and I'm not going to tell you it won't hurt for a long time, but I will tell you that you're stronger than you know and you'll get through this." Jean became my lifeline in those early days. She had a way of understanding pain without trying to minimize it. She never said things like, "It will all work out," or "Everything happens for a reason." Instead, she acknowledged the injustice of what had happened to me and helped me find ways to process my grief and anger constructively. I returned to school after a week, now commuting from the other side of town. The rumors had already spread, though distorted beyond recognition. Some people whispered that I'd had a mental breakdown. Others said I was on drugs. A few even suggested I'd been arrested. I walked through the halls with my head down, trying to become invisible. My grades continued to suffer as I struggled to focus on schoolwork while dealing with the trauma of being disowned. My former friends, unsure how to react to my changed circumstances, gradually drifted away. The isolation was crushing. But in that darkness, I found one unexpected light. Sarah Chen, a quiet girl from my physics class, approached me in the cafeteria one day. "Do you want to sit with us?" she asked, gesturing to a table where a few other students sat. I hesitated, expecting some kind of trick, but her smile seemed genuine. I sat down, and for the first time in weeks, I felt a tiny flicker of normalcy. Sarah never pressed me for details about my situation, but she offered her friendship unconditionally. She invited me to study with her after school, introduced me to her other friends, and gradually drew me out of my shell. When I finally told her the full story months later, she believed me without question. "Some people are just toxic," she said, "and sometimes those people are family. That doesn't mean there's anything wrong with you." Working through my trauma was a slow process. The Fosters helped me find a therapist, Dr. Winters, who specialized in family trauma and abandonment issues. In those weekly sessions, I began to unpack the layers of betrayal I'd experienced. "What you're feeling is normal," Dr. Winters assured me. "When a parent chooses someone else over their child, it violates the most fundamental bond of trust. That injury runs deep." To help cover my expenses and save for college, I got a part-time job at a local bookstore. The owner, an elderly man named Mr. Abrams, was patient with me when anxiety made me make mistakes, and the quiet environment soothed my frayed nerves. Being surrounded by books reminded me of my mother, which was both painful and comforting. My junior year of high school was a blur of therapy sessions, work shifts, and struggling to keep up with schoolwork. By senior year, I had begun to stabilize. My grades improved enough that I could apply to state colleges, though my dream of an Ivy League education had been another casualty of Amanda's machinations. The day college acceptance letters began arriving was bittersweet. I was accepted to the state university with a partial scholarship, an achievement that would have been celebrated in my old life. I showed the letter to Jean, who hugged me tightly and said, "I'm so proud of you, Adela. Look at what you've accomplished despite everything." I still had moments of overwhelming grief, especially during holidays or milestones when the absence of family was most acute. But I had built a support system, the Fosters who treated me like a daughter, Sarah who had become like a sister, and Dr. Winters, who helped me navigate the complex emotions of my situation. After graduation, I moved into a tiny apartment near the State University campus with Sarah, who was attending the same school. We furnished it with second-hand items and made it our own, a place where I finally felt safe. I chose to major in psychology, driven by a desire to understand what had happened in my family and to eventually help others who had experienced similar trauma. College opened new doors for me. I joined clubs, made more friends, and even cautiously began dating. Though trust issues made romantic relationships difficult, I continued therapy, working through the abandonment and betrayal that had shaped my adolescence. As the years passed, I built a life I was proud of. I graduated with honors, got a job at a community mental health center, and later earned a master's degree in clinical social work. I developed a specialty in helping teenagers navigate family trauma, using my own experience to inform my practice. Through it all, I never heard from my father, Amanda, or Brittany. I had moved across the state for graduate school and my career, changing my phone number and email address multiple times. I'd looked them up online occasionally, learning that my father had made partner at his firm and that Brittany had indeed pursued fashion, working for a boutique in New York. Amanda appeared in photos from charity events, still playing the role of perfect wife. I tried not to dwell on them, focusing instead on building my own life and healing my wounds. And then 10 years after I was thrown out of my childhood home, a message appeared in my Facebook inbox that would reopen all the old wounds and force me to confront the past I'd worked so hard to overcome. It was an ordinary Wednesday evening when the notification appeared on my phone. I had just finished dinner and was settling in to read some research papers for work when I saw it. A message request from Brittany Kellerman. My heart began racing immediately and I felt lightheaded. After 10 years of silence, why would my stepsister contact me now? With trembling fingers, I opened the message. Adela, I know it's been a long time and you probably hate me. I wouldn't blame you. But I needed to reach out. My mother passed away last month after battling cancer for 2 years. Before she died, she confessed everything about what happened 10 years ago. She admitted she made up the assault accusation to get you out of the house. Dad now knows the truth. He's devastated and wants to make amends. Please, if you're willing to talk, he would like to apologize and try to rebuild some kind of relationship with you. I know what we did was unforgivable, but people can change. I have changed. Mum changed at the end too, though I guess that's too little too late. Please consider reaching out. Dad has never been the same since you left. I read the message 3 times, unable to process what I was seeing. Amanda was dead. She had confessed to her lies on her deathbed. And now, after 10 years of silence, my father and stepsister wanted back in my life, as if a simple apology could erase a decade of abandonment and trauma. I closed the app without responding and called Sarah, who had remained my closest friend since high school. You won't believe what just happened, I said when she answered, my voice shaking. I read her Brittany's message. Holy shit, Sarah said when I finished. Are you okay? What are you going to do? I don't know, I admitted. Part of me wants to ignore it completely. Another part wants to respond with exactly how much damage they did. And there's this tiny, stupid part that still wonders what it would be like to have my dad back in my life. Whatever you decide, I'll support you, Sarah assured me. But take some time to think about it. This is a lot to process. I took her advice and scheduled an emergency session with Dr. Winters the next day. She had been my therapist for years, helping me work through the layers of trauma from my abandonment. What does your gut tell you? She asked after I shared Brittany's message. That this isn't really about me, I said. It's about relieving their guilt. Now that Amanda is gone, my dad and Brittany want absolution. They want me to say I forgive them so they can move on without feeling bad about what they did. Dr. Winters nodded. That may very well be true. The question is, what do you need? Would having any kind of relationship with your father bring you healing, or would it reopen old wounds? I thought about it for days, turning the question over in my mind. I reread Brittany's message countless times, analysing every word. What struck me most was the lack of genuine accountability. She acknowledged what they did was unforgivable, yet in the same breath asked for forgiveness. She claimed people could change, but offered no evidence of how she or my father had changed, no understanding of the depth of pain they'd caused. After a week of contemplation, I made my decision. I sat down at my computer and wrote my response. Brittany, I received your message about Amanda's death and confession. I'm glad she finally told the truth, though it changes nothing about the past 10 years. I'm not interested in reconciliation. Your mother destroyed my life with her lies, but you and your father were willing participants. You told me to kill myself. He threw away his only daughter based on a lie that any decent parent would have questioned. You all made your choice a decade ago, and I've made mine now. I'm glad Amanda is dead. The world is better without someone so cruel and manipulative. And honestly, I wish your father would join her. The pain you both caused me can never be undone with an apology. Don't contact me again. I hit send before I could second guess myself, then blocked both Brittany and my father's phone numbers and social media accounts. My hands were shaking and I felt sick to my stomach, but also strangely liberated. For the first time, I had expressed the full extent of my anger without tempering it to spare their feelings. The relief was short-lived. 2 days later, I received an email from my father. Somehow, he had found my work email address. Adela say, he wrote, I understand your anger. What we did to you was unconscionable. I failed you as a father in the worst possible way, and I've lived with that guilt every day. Amanda controlled our family with her lies, but that doesn't excuse my failure to protect you. I should have believed my daughter. Nothing I can say will undo the harm, but please know that I have never stopped loving you or regretting my actions. I respect your decision if you want no contact, but I wanted you to know that my door is always open if you ever change your mind. His words stirred a complicated mix of emotions. There was the child in me that still longed for her father's, loved the teenager who felt the devastating pain of his betrayal, and the adult who had learned to live without him. I didn't respond to the email, but I didn't delete it either. The next morning, I woke to find 3 new emails from Brittany. Each one was more aggressive than the last. The first expressed shock at my cruelty in saying I was glad her mother was dead. The second accused me of being bitter and unable to move on with my life. The third was a full-blown rant about how I was heartless and selfish for not giving our father a chance to make amends. I forwarded the emails to my lawyer friend Jason, asking his advice. "This feels like the beginning of harassment," I told him. "I made it clear I don't want contact, and now they're escalating." Jason agreed. "Forward me any additional messages, but don't respond. If it continues, we can send a cease and desist letter." Over the next week, the harassment intensified. Brittany created new social media accounts to bypass my blocks. My father called my office repeatedly until the receptionist was instructed not to put his calls through. Then came the flying monkeys, distant relatives and family friends I hadn't spoken to in years, suddenly reaching out to tell me I should forgive and forget and not hold grudges. The final straw came when Brittany showed up at my workplace unannounced. I was in a session with a client when the receptionist buzzed to say someone claiming to be my sister was insisting on seeing me. I finished the session and went to the waiting room to find Brittany pacing impatiently. "What are you doing here?" I asked, keeping my voice low but firm. "I told you not to contact me." "You can't just ignore us," she hissed. "Do you have any idea what you're doing to Dad? He can barely function since your horrible message. Lower your voice or he'll call security," I warned. "You need to leave, now. Not until you agree to talk to Dad," she insisted. "He deserves a chance to explain." "He had that chance 10 years ago," I said coldly. "He chose to believe a lie over his own daughter. Now please leave before I have you removed." Brittany stepped closer, her face flushed with anger. "You think you're so perfect, don't you? Well, let me tell you something. Mum might have lied about the assault, but she was right about you being a cold, selfish bitch. Maybe that's why Dad was so quick to believe her." Something in me snapped at her words, not in anger, but in clarity. I saw Brittany for what she truly was, a woman who had never taken responsibility for her part in destroying my life, who still believed she was entitled to my forgiveness. In that moment, I felt nothing but pity for her. "Goodbye, Brittany," I said, turning to the receptionist. "Please call security. This woman is trespassing and harassing a staff member." As security escorted her out, Brittany shouted, "This isn't over, Adela. The whole family deserves to know what kind of person you really are." That evening, Jason helped me draft a formal cease and desist letter to both Brittany and my father, warning that any further contact would result in legal action for harassment. We also found social media posts Brittany had made, sharing a distorted version of our interaction and painting me as a heartless daughter who refused to forgive her repentant father. "Family drama being played out on social media," Jason commented as we reviewed the posts. "Classy. They can't stand that I won't play my assigned role," I said. "The forgiving daughter who absolves them of guilt. It ruins their narrative." The harassment continued for several more weeks, with occasional messages slipping through my blocks. Family friends calling to check in, but really trying to persuade me to reconcile, and even a letter from my father's sister, who had never once reached out during the 10 years I was on my own. Finally, after the cease and desist letter and a follow-up call from Jason threatening a restraining order, the contact stopped. The sudden silence was almost as jarring as the harassment had been. Part of me kept waiting for the next attempt, the next boundary violation. But as weeks passed without incident, I began to believe they had finally gotten the message. The whole experience had reopened wounds I thought had long since healed. I found myself having nightmares again, waking up in a cold sweat, with the feeling of being abandoned fresh in my mind. But this time, I had the tools and support system to process those feelings. I had built a life that could withstand the storm of my past returning. As the dust settled, I realized something important. I had stood my ground. The 16-year-old girl who had been thrown away by her family had grown into a woman who could protect herself, who wouldn't accept easy apologies for unforgivable actions, who knew her own worth even when others tried to diminish it. That knowledge brought a different kind of healing, one born not of forgiveness, but of self-respect and resilience. 6 months after the unwelcome reconnection with my past, I sat in Dr. Winter's office for our regular session. The immediacy of the crisis had passed, but the ripples of contact with my father and Brittany continued to affect me in unexpected ways. "I've been thinking a lot about forgiveness," I told Dr. Winters. "Everyone talks about it like it's the ultimate goal, like you can't truly heal until you forgive the people who hurt you. But what does that even mean in a situation like mine?" Dr. Winters leaned forward slightly. "That's a profound question, Adela. I think many people confuse forgiveness with reconciliation. They aren't the same thing. Forgiveness is an internal process that can help release the grip that anger and resentment have on you. Reconciliation is re-establishing a relationship with someone who hurt you, which may or may not be healthy or possible. Her words resonated deeply, so I could potentially forgive them someday without letting them back into my life. Absolutely, she confirmed. And forgiveness doesn't mean saying what they did was acceptable. It doesn't erase accountability or consequences. Over the next few weeks, I wrestled with these ideas. I decided to write a letter to my father, not one I would ever send, but as a way to articulate the full impact of his betrayal. I spent days on it, pouring out everything he'd missed, the nights I cried myself to sleep in a strange house, the graduation where I had no family to cheer for me, the struggle to pay for college without parental support, the holidays spent with friends, families, because I had none of my own. The years of therapy needed to believe I was worthy of love. I wrote about the confusion of being abandoned by the one person who was supposed to love me unconditionally, about the damage done to my ability to trust, about how even now, a decade later, I still sometimes woke up feeling the raw wound of rejection. When the letter was finished, I read it to Dr. Winters. "What will you do with it?" she asked when I was done. I thought about sending it, I admitted, but I realized it wouldn't change anything. He either already understands the magnitude of what he did, in which case the letter isn't necessary, or he doesn't truly grasp it, in which case no letter will make him see. Instead of sending the letter, I performed a small private ceremony in my apartment. I read the letter aloud one final time, then burned it in a fireproof dish, watching the pages curl and blacken, the words of pain transforming into smoke and ash. It wasn't forgiveness exactly, but it was a release, an acknowledgement that my healing didn't depend on their understanding. Around this time, I received an unexpected email from my father's sister, my Aunt Catherine. Unlike the previous message pushing for reconciliation, this one was different. "Adela," she wrote, "I want to apologize for my part in what happened to you. I should have questioned James' version of events more carefully. I should have reached out to you during these years. I failed you as an aunt, and I'm truly sorry. I understand if you want no contact with any of us, but I wanted you to know that I regret my inaction." Her message seemed genuine, without the expectation or demand that had characterized all the other family communications. After careful consideration, I responded with a brief but civil message thanking her for her apology and explaining that while I wasn't interested in rekindling family relationships, I appreciated her acknowledgement of what had happened. To my surprise, my boundaries were respected. Catherine replied only to say she understood, and that if I ever needed anything, I'd know where to find her. There were no further messages, no pressure, just the simple acceptance of my decision. This exchange, small as it was, helped me see that healthy boundaries were possible even with family. It reinforced my decision to keep my father and Brittany out of my life while leaving the door open just slightly for others who might approach with genuine respect and remorse. As summer turned to fall, I threw myself into my work at the Community Mental Health Centre. I'd started a support group for young adults, estranged from family, creating the kind of resource I wish I'd had at 16. Facilitating the group was both challenging and deeply rewarding, as I watched people who had been through similar traumas find connection and understanding. It was through my work that I met Thomas, a psychologist, who ran a program for at-risk teens. We collaborated on a project bridging our two services, and gradually a professional relationship evolved into friendship and then into something more. Unlike previous relationships that had been hampered by my trust issues with Thomas, I found myself able to be vulnerable in ways I hadn't before. When the topic of my estrangement came up, Thomas listened without judgment. "Family is who treats you like family," he said simply. "Sometimes that's blood relatives, sometimes it's the people we choose." Guillaume. His own background helped him understand my perspective. Raised by a single mother after his father abandoned them, he had created his own definition of family that prioritized loyalty and support over bloodlines. With him, I never felt the pressure to reconcile or forgive that I had experienced from others, just acceptance of my choices and respect for my boundaries. As our relationship deepened, I was introduced to his mother, his half-siblings, and his extended network of close friends. They welcomed me warmly, and for the first time, I began to feel part of a family unit again, one built on mutual respect rather than obligation. Around the same time, I received an update from Sarah, who had maintained loose connections with people from our hometown. "I thought you should know," she told me during one of our regular phone calls, "your dad and Brittany have finally backed off. Apparently, someone at the last family gathering called them out for harassing you and suggested that if they truly regretted what happened, they'd respect your wish for no contact. The news brought an unexpected sense of relief, so they actually stopped trying to force a reunion. Seems like it, Sarah confirmed. From what I heard, your dad told everyone that he had to accept your decision even though it broke his heart. I felt a complex mix of emotions at this information. Part of me was still angry that it had taken external pressure for them to respect my boundaries. Another part felt vindicated that someone else had recognized their behavior as harassment. And a small, quiet part felt a twinge of sadness that the door to that relationship was truly closing even though I had been the one to close it. That evening, I shared the news with Thomas as we cooked dinner together. "How do you feel about it?" he asked, his expression thoughtful. "Mostly relieved," I said after considering the question, "but also a little sad, which doesn't make sense. I don't want them in my life." "It makes perfect sense," he assured me. "You're mourning the relationship you should have had, not the one you actually had. That's valid grief." His insight helped me understand my own conflicted feelings. I wasn't missing my actual father, who had failed me so profoundly. I was missing the father I deserved to have, the one who would have believed and protected me. As the year progressed, I continued to build my life on my own terms. My career flourished as I was promoted to program director at the mental health centre. My relationship with Thomas deepened into a solid partnership built on mutual respect and understanding. My circle of chosen family expanded to include new friends and connections. I still had moments of grief, especially during traditional family times like holidays, but these episodes became less frequent and less intense. I had learned to create new traditions to find joy in the relationships I had, rather than mourning those I had lost. One evening, as Thomas and I walked through a park near our apartment, he asked me a question that made me stop in my tracks. "Do you think you'll ever forgive your father?" I considered the question carefully before answering. "I'm not sure forgiveness is the right word," I said finally. "I've made peace with what happened as much as anyone can. I've built a good life despite it. But forgiveness feels like saying what he did was somehow okay and it wasn't. It will never be okay to abandon your child based on a lie." Thomas nodded. "I understand that. Maybe there's something between forgiveness and resentment, some middle ground, where you acknowledge the harm but don't let it define your future. That's where I'm trying to live," I agreed. In that middle ground. And it was true. I had found a way to acknowledge the trauma of my past without being consumed by it. To remember without reliving. To carry the lessons without the burden of constant anger. It wasn't forgiveness in the traditional sense, but it was freedom, a kind of peace that came not from excusing the inexcusable, but from building a life so full and meaningful that the past no longer held power over me. As we continued our walk, the setting sun painting the sky in brilliant shades of orange and pink, I reflected on the journey from that terrified 16-year-old girl to the woman I had become. The path had been difficult, often painful, but it had led me to strength I never knew I possessed, to relationships built on genuine care, rather than obligation, to work that gave my suffering meaning by helping others through similar pain. Family isn't always about blood. Sometimes it's about who stands beside you when everyone else walks away. Sometimes it's about the family you choose and who chooses you in return. And sometimes the most profound act of self-love is recognizing when a relationship is too toxic to maintain, even when that relationship is with a parent. I had lost my blood family, but I had found something perhaps more valuable. The knowledge that I was worthy of love and respect, that I could trust my own truth, even when others denied it, and that I had the strength to build a life of meaning and purpose from the ashes of betrayal. That knowledge, hard won through years of pain and healing, was a foundation no one could ever take away from me again. Have you ever had to make the difficult choice between forgiveness and self-protection? My journey taught me that sometimes keeping toxic family members out of your life is the healthiest decision you can make. I'd love to hear your thoughts in the comments about setting boundaries with family who have hurt you deeply. Was there ever a time when you had to choose your own well-being over family expectations? If this story resonated with you, please hit the like button and subscribe to hear more stories about finding strength after betrayal. Thank you for listening to my story, and remember that you deserve relationships built on respect and trust, even if that means creating a new family of your own choosing.